short sections you can brush out.
So I just started the recording so we can see what's going on here. Just my video.
Maybe put it in a loop.
Okay, so what we're going to tie, this is actually at the suggestion of Michael Corey, who sent me a couple of photos. And this arose out of the discussion last Tuesday about fishing for carp on Elk Lake. And somebody asked, is there a fly you can use for carp? So Michael sent a pattern and I figured that looks interesting. So I think we'll try this up. I don't know, it's got a specific name. And then somebody suggested that we should do it in yellow, like as a corn fly. So there's yellow, but I think Dale would recognize this rabbit strip. And I tied one in sort of greenish colors, green with brown. So you could play around with the colors a bit. I'm going to tie this version, which because it's visible, you can see what's going on with it. Now it's a inverted hook fly, which means that it's because I'm using the dumbbell eyes tied on top, it's going to fish upside down, and that should help make it weedless. If you're going to fish for carp and such in the weeds, you're going to want to avoid catching up on the weeds all the time. I picked a fairly large hook. This is a size 4 because I think if you're catching carp, you're going to want to be able to get your pliers in there and get it out of the fish's mouth without struggling too much. So it's a very wide gap, size 4. It's the this Firehole Sticks guys. They're $11 for 36 hooks, which is not horribly priced. It's an extra long shank, and it's got a little turned up sharp point, but no barb. So again, making catch and release with carp easier. So we'll put the hook in the vise here. Now, the other thing that you're going to need is dumbbell eyes, which I bought these a little while back. So this is called Fly Eyes. They come just as the eye without as a dumbbell without the eye, and the little card here has the actual plastic eyes that you have to glue on to the end of the dumbbells. And I discovered after much fooling around trying to figure out how to get the eye off the backing card and onto the thing, I discovered you just use the end of your bodkin, pick it off the paper, and then stick it on the eye. So that's the first thing. The other thing you're going to want is a pretty good thread. I'm using 6/0 here. That's not it. Get the right thread here. So this one is going to be a fairly chunky thread. I'm going to start right behind the eye. And I'm going to wrap right down the hook shank. A good halfway down hook, probably just before the point. Just to put a base for all the stuff that's going to go on here. I'm going to wrap this thread all the way down now to where I'm going to have the tail attached. Now, because I'm going to be putting rabbit strip on the hook, I don't want the rabbit strip to slide too far forward when I poke it on. So when I get to where the barb would normally be, I'm going to build a little bit of a thread bump there. That'll keep the rabbit strip from creeping up the fly. Bring my thread back up to about the 1/3 point on the shank. I want to leave a fair bit of room at the eye. So just in front of a half. And as I do for clouds or minnows, I'm going to build another little thread bump here. This is what helps keep the eyes from twisting. And I put the eyes behind the bump, slide it up so it rush up against the bump, and then just wrap diagonally across the hourglass center of the eyes. Now, to make sure that this is going to stick and not twist too far around, I've got this in our trip down to the States in the art supply store in Seattle. I found this actual brand name Crazy Glue. Comes with a nice base so it doesn't tip over. It's their 10-second glue. Comes with a brush, and it's designed really well. It doesn't have a top on it that will get gummed up when you try and put your brush back in. So I just put a little bit of Crazy Glue on there. I'm gonna couple more wraps just to cinch the Crazy Glue around, and that should secure it. Then I come back to the bump. Now make a dubbing loop. I've got a dubbing spinner here, one of these nice little weighted ones. I'll hook that, and I'm going to make a fairly long dubbing loop. So it's going to be about 3 inches long. And I bring my thread up, wrap around right where the thread is on. And then I'm going to wrap once around the thread itself and around again. And that closes up the top end of the loop. I'll get my thread forward here out of the way. I put my bobbin rest out of here so it just keeps that thread out of the way while I'm doing the dubbing. So this stuff I discovered at Robinson's. $5 for a little package. Not cheap, but it's called Carp dub, and there's a bunch of different colors that they have. Now I'm going to do is just pull a little bit out of the package like that, and this is what I'm going to use to put into the dubbing loop. To make sure it sticks, I have some dubbing wax. I've had this stuff for ages. And I'll get in here and I'll wax the inside of both threads so that I got a little bit of wax on all of the thread there. That'll help the dubbing material to stick to the loop. Now this stuff, I'm going to hold the loop open a bit with my finger, and I'll pull right out of this stuff. I will pull sideways on it, and you see I get a clump of dubbing that is got some length to it. I don't know if you can see that, maybe there. And I'll slide that up inside the loop so that there's dubbing sticking out either side of the loop. And I'll just keep doing that with small clumps of the material and pack it up. So every time I pull some dubbing out of this package, I'm just going to give it a little tug so that there's some length to it. This is going to make a very fuzzy dubbing. As you can see, it's making a very loose, fuzzy dubbing material. Keep doing this until I get my loop all the way down to the bottom. And as I get to the bottom, I'll take my finger out of the loop so that it traps all that dubbing in the loop. And with this little gizmo, whirligig gizmo, as I pull it down, I don't know if you can see that, as I pull it down, these little wire arms come close together, and that traps all the material in the loop. And I'll just make sure I've got enough density here to make a good dense body. So I'll slide it up the loop a little bit, each little bit of dubbing, until I get right down to the end. And I can fiddle around with it a bit so I get a little bit of even dubbing on either side of the loop. Then I just hang it straight down and give it a spin. Oops, that came off the bobbin rest. So I'm going to make a nice tight spin of the dubbing. let my thread hang off the eye, and I will start right at the very back and start wrapping, dubbing around the shank of the hook. And I'm going to try to make wraps that are sort of side by side, but maybe getting a little closer together and maybe a little overlap as I get toward where the eyes are. So I've got a good bulky body. I'm going to take one wrap under the eyes, in behind, wrap over, and then back over and over, and then under the eyes again, bring it up in front. This lub loop was a little short. That's okay. There. Tie it off in front. And then if I can get my scissors in there, I needed to make my loop a little shorter, or longer, I should say. Come on. Caught it up. There we go. Gonna get that. There we go. A little loose dubbing, just gonna bring it over. There we go. And I see I'm a little shy of dubbing, so I'm gonna do a conventional dubbing outside loop, put a little more wax on the thread. And I'll spin just a little bit more dubbing on here because it's a little bit, not quite enough dubbing right in behind the eyes. And again, pulling little clumps off out of the package. So right behind the eyes, I'm going to do a little more loose dubbing and then bring my thread in front. Now you see I've left a fair bit of room in front. There's a reason for that. You'll see that in a minute. Now from here, I'm going to put legs on. And I've used these silicone legs in a couple of different colors. So what I'll do is I'll take, they come in this package as a group. And I'll take one and just pull it off the package. Bring my thread up so it's kind of halfway between the eye of the hook and the dumbbell eyes. And at this point, I'm going to turn the hook upside down. I'll wrap the legs around the thread halfway, even at the tips. Bring it up on top and tie it down. Now, what I want to do with this is I want one leg on either side, one over the eye on that side, wrap back towards the eye, another over the eye on this side, wrapped over top. And what that'll do is that'll hold that material in place. And then I got to take the green ones just to get some color contrast. I'll do the same thing. Fold it over. Bring it up to tie it down. And then one on one side, one on the other side.
There are crayfish in Elk Lake.
And I see I'm a little bit of short of dubbing on the front here, so I'm just going to put a little bit of dubbing there just to cover up the bottom of the where I tied those legs in.
Hey, Florin, the answer is yes.
Okay, well, there's the answer for why this fly might work.
Yeah.
Because crayfish would be on the bottom and carp would not shy away from, especially the little ones.
Yeah.
Before they grow too big, that'd be easy prey, and I think now is about the right time.
So I'm going to use my little dubbing teaser with the Velcro on a stick and just rough this dubbing loop up a little bit before I am finished here. Because I want the body to have a bit of bulk to it. a bit of shape. So I've got a few loose strands coming out of here. Make sure the legs are in the right place. Now I got to put the rabbit strip on. This is a fairly quick fly to tie, actually, when you get going. Now, for rabbit strip, this one I'm going to use this guy, which is Caroline's Tiger Barred black and orange with yellow. And I think Dale probably recognizes this particular material. So I'm going to measure this rabbit strip. I want the stuff that sticks out the back to be maybe just a hair less than shank length. So I take my bodkin and get in here and get it right down to the leather of the rabbit strip and part the fur away from the leather so that there's a gap there. Then where that gap is, I'm going to take the leather part of the rabbit strip facing the point of the hook. This hook is inverted in the vise. I'm going to poke the point of the hook right through the middle of the leather part, just like that, so that it's now sticking on the hook. Momentarily take the hook out of the vise because I want to get that rabbit strip around the bend and up to where the end of the dub body is, with the leather of the short parts facing down. Then I'll put my hook back in the vise, upside down again, and bring the rabbit strip over the top of the body and measure to where the eye is, just behind the eye. Get my scissors in there and cut it just short of where the eye is. Cutting the, there we go. There we go. Now I got a little bit leather exposed there. Just because I cut that at a bit of an angle, I need to trim it off a bit. There we go. So I've got a bit of leather exposed right behind the eye. That might be a bit long. So I cut this to give it a bit of a point. I cut the corner off the leather part of the strip. So that there's a bit of a spot there to have the thread bite down on the leather before it hits the fur. Back to super glue. I take a little bit of super glue and just dab it right there, just to get that rabbit strip to stick down. And I will poke the rabbit strip down with my fingernail onto where the glue is, and then wrap over top of the rabbit strip. Leather part. And I don't mind having a bit of a nose on this fly. And I'll tie it down fairly snug. I don't want to build a lot of head up in behind the eye. I want to keep the eye and right behind the eye relatively clear. Now build a bit of head, tapered head there. And then whip finish. Just to be sure, we'll do a double. Now, one of the reasons that I've kept it clear behind the eye is to fish this, because that's now it was a downturned eye, but now it's going to fish upside down with an upturned eye. You want to get a nice straight pull from the thread or from your leader as it goes through the eye of the hook. And my suggestion would be, if you're going to tie this on, to use what's called a turtle knot. And that's where you go through the eye, you make a loop under, you make a loop over top, and then you go wrap through. So you make a little slip knot, tighten the slip knot down, and put the loop right behind here so that the leader goes straight through the eye of the hook, and the knot that you've tied, the slip knot, ties right behind the upturned eye. And that means that it's not going to pull on the eye at an odd angle. It's going to pull straight out. And take him out, put him the other way around. So that is just to let you see where the whole rabbit strip ends up. I pull it up so that it's right on the bend of the hook. And then we'll stick it in there so you can see where the bend is. And then just use my little Velcro stick to even out the rabbit clump. And that's the end of them. Because of this dubbing, it tends to put little bits out, so you may have to do a little trim job on it in places. But I think my gut feel is that this is going to be a very attractive fly to a bunch of fish, because it's going to capture air in that dubbing material, and it's going to move around. I think it's going to have a really lively action. I think my gut feel this is going to be a great bass fly. Oh, and if you think these strips are a little long, I'm just going to gather them all together under here and then just trim them a hair short so they don't hang too far out. And that's it. So a fun fly. This one I used green, and this one I used yellow for the rabbit strip. And there's all sorts of colors. I've got some yellow dubbing and some green dubbing and this stuff here, and I've got rabbit strips in this green with black and orange with black and some regular brown and some light brown. So I've tied up one or two of each. So there you go.
Make a great saltwater fly, Dave.
I have a feeling that, tied on a slightly smaller hook for bonefish, that would be a usable fly.
That's exactly what I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's got, the legs will give it some action, and it'll probably make a big plop when you throw it in the water, but if you cast far enough out in front of the bonefish, you should be okay. And of course, for barracuda, it would work. Just use a wire leader. Hey, Florin, you should try this for a pike fly.
Yeah.
I'll bet you it'd be a killer pike fly.
I would, but with a big modification, because I don't like to cast wet rabbits. I would replace the I tied a few rabbit strip flies, and they just sit at the bottom of a box. I never fished them. I just positively hate the casting feeling of that soggy stuff. Just drives me nuts. So what I've taken to for pike, and it actually works surprisingly well, is use hackles. One hackle per side is gonna be enough. 2 hackles would make your fly last a little longer, because once you lose a hackle, you have a backup hackle.
Yeah.
So if you want a bushier effect, you use 2 hackles. If you want a slimmer effect, you just use 1 hackle per side. And the hackle actually gives a very nice movement in the water. It wouldn't work for a very small fly because you need enough length in the hackle to get that undulating motion, but the pike go simply nuts.
I would I guess when you get out here, you and I are going to have to do some casting practice, and I'll show you how to cast a wet rabbit strip.
Yeah, too bad there's no pike.
Well, no, there's no pike, but there's bass.
There's bass. Yeah, I know. I mean, this fly would be a super monster to cast because you've got the dumbbell eyes and
Yep.
you got the wet rabbit.
Yep.
So this is probably like casting a little brick.
Well, two things. One is you want to use a fly line that has a really strong weight forward taper, really rapid weight forward taper, like one of those bass plug fly lines.
Outbound short.
Big pardon?
The outbound short.
Yeah, something like that, which turns over heavy flies really well. So you don't want to use a double taper or something with a long front taper on the fly line.
Oh,
And
so I
keep
should
your
leave
leader
my
short.
bamboo at home when I try to cast this, you say?
Yeah,
No,
and
if I
use
wait
a really
bamboo
short
for
leader.
this.
A short leader, like 6 feet, 7 feet, short and relatively stiff. You don't want to put that on the end of a 9-foot leader with a 4X tip. It just won't go. You'll be ducking all day. And I learned that trick. This is when I was in New Zealand and fishing the Tongariro. They don't allow corkies on the Tongariro River. So if you have a strike indicator, you only allowed to use yarn. So if you're casting out a hefty nymph, which they usually use to get right down on the bottom with a dropper up from it, that's a tough rig to cast because the indicator is clipped just where the fly line joins your leader. And it's a big chunk of yarn about this big. They call it a budgie for obvious reasons. And casting that sucker, this would be easy compared to casting a budgie with a weighted nymph on the end. You just have to have big open loops, and you have to have a really, like I say, a rapid taper on the front end of your fly line. It's doable.
If you don't cast a loop that's like 6 inches,
Yeah, you can't do that.
you can't get it out.
And you can't throw a tailing loop. If you throw a tailing loop, you're going to be breaking your rod.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's the. Let me just get me off the spotlight here. Come on, where are we? The spotlight. Okay. So we're back. So now we can go to Florin, who can tie us the hair of the dog that bit you. Fly.
Yeah, this is the hair of the dog that Dick used to own, which was a Lhasa Apso dog, I guess a Tibetan breed. And it looks like one of these dogs with hair in their eyes, lots of under fur and lots of brushing if you have one, I think. And that's how Dick ended up with this fly. So basically this is the main ingredient. It's otherwise a fairly straightforward Comparadon style fly. And the main ingredient is this hair of the dog for the dubbed body. And by the way, hair of the dog would be the correct way of saying it in Romanian and many other languages, where the order of the words is the proper one, not dog hair. Nobody would understand you. So anyway, you can do it with a bit of sparkle in the wing or without. I do like the effect of the sparkle in the wing. It's gonna help you see this fly in a lot more conditions than without it. And so now I'm gonna put the lights back on so I can actually see what I'm doing, and tie one. So let's see if this is going to be okay. I think once I take the fly out, the light conditions improve a little bit. So this one's on a size 12. Just a standard dry fly hook. This is a masthead. $94,840. And I think I need to make a little adjustment here. Okay. You can use whatever thread you want for consistency of color with the dab body, so the thread doesn't show. If you want contrasting thread to show, just use a different color. I'm just going to use, in order to blend the thread in the body, I'm just going to use tan. This is 8/0 uni. And you can start with the tails, you can start with the wings. It's just really a matter of personal taste more than anything else. And the other thing is this is a place where you might find it useful to have two hair stackers, one small hair stacker for the tail hairs and one bigger one for the wing. And what I'm using is, this is a big fly, it's a size 12. I'm using some fairly coarse elk that I wouldn't be using for other flies, but for this one it works well. You want this thing to look a little bit rough, and I tied about a couple of dozen of them, and I found that I tend to tie a little too neatly, and I was actually deliberately struggling to make it look a little buggier. So remove a little clump of hair from the hide. And depending on the hair you're using, you're going to have to experiment exactly. I can't tell you exactly how much you want to cut at the base, because it depends on how fuzzy, how much underfur you have on your patch of hair, right? So here you can see that, you know, I got a fairly thick clump of hair, but there's a lot of junk here that I still need to remove. And what I'm going to be using is going to be mostly at the tips, which are a lot thinner. So, you know, adjust the amount of hair to the particular conditions you're operating in. And then get this hair off. If there's too much static, I found actually that just rubbing a tiny little bit of dabbing wax on your fingertips helps to reduce that static buildup that makes all this underfur stick to your fingers. And then give this a few good whacks and remove the bottom of the stacker so that you can see the tips, and grab the tips. Now I'm gonna measure the wing, so kind of standard dry fly proportions. At this point, when you grab the properly lined up tips, you'll find that there's still hairs coming off your clump. So just, you know, you'll have to keep cleaning this for a little bit. It's really hard to clean it all at once because the hair clings to itself a fair bit. And then just measure the length of the hook shank. So what I do is I attach it at the standard tying point for wing. And then what I do is I keep the hair in my left hand and I wrap with a thread over the butt ends, moving towards the tail. Now, I've done a little bit of a mistake here. As you can see, I've mistakenly pulled and pushed all of this back. So I'm gonna have to undo this and go back. Okay, so further up front. Okay, This is better. So tie it in. This will secure your hair. There'll be a lot of cleanup to do afterwards, so this is typically looks like a mess like this. And then take your scissors and cut down here at an angle. That'll also give a little bit of extra taper to the body. So at this point, if your wing somehow is not perfectly tight, at this point you can still make some adjustments and you can finally secure it. There's no need for crazy glue here. You can secure this by just wrapping thread in between and over these cut ends of the hair. Once you've done that, this wing is not going anywhere anymore. Okay, a few wraps in front here so that your hairs don't end up all under the hook. Now you can decide whether this might be a good point to add a little bit of sparkle to the wing. And what I would use for that is simply, I have some strands of, you want something a little finer, you know, so look through your crystal flash or any other kind of flashy fiber that you have that's relatively easy to work with, and see if you have something that's a little finer. So this is some old crystal flash that I have that seems to be fairly fine. I just take a piece of whatever length it happens to be and fold it a couple of times, because you just want an accent here. You don't want a ton of flash. Just a little bit goes a long way. I've tried some with a little bit more flash, but they don't look very good. So here I have only 4 strands. You can go up to 6, maybe 8, but don't overdo it beyond that. So just attach these right on top of your wing. Go back a few turns with thread to firmly secure it. This is not going to go anywhere. There will be dubbing on top as well. And now move the thread back to where the tail is going to go in. Now for the tail, I'm going to use, you can use moose mane, you can use all sorts of things. I'm going to use some moose hawk, which is the preferred material for some people when it comes to tails. It's a little stiffer. It's an awful lot shorter than moose mane, and it's a little finer as well. So if you do smaller flies, I don't know, moose mane feels like a huge waste. Now the thing with this is you want a fairly sparse tail, not a huge bundle of fibers. So it's almost like, you know, eyeball it and almost count no more than 6 fibers, you know, at most. You don't want a very thick tail. It just kind of changes the character of the fly a fair bit. So here's just a few fibers. And there is some fuzz even on this. Just a little bit of fuzz, just clean it up. Because what happens is if you leave the fuzz in there, you can also clean it later. And if there's always a little bit left that you're going to have to clean later. But the more you clean now, the easier the stacking is going to be. And this is where these little stackers come in handy for. So this one has not the thinnest diameter funnel. There's an even smaller model than this, but this is kind of the right size, I find, for stacking these tail fibers. So this is really easy. You just, you know, kind of knock it on your vise a little bit, and that's all you need. So there are our tips nicely stacked up You can see a little bit of evil fuzz there, but that's going to come off later. And again, measure. You want about, again, shank length. Put this in place at the tying point and take a couple of turns of thread. Make sure that the tails are where you want them to be. If they are, then a few more turns of thread forward. Grab the butt ends so that you still have the wing there. So this is just separate the two because they have a tendency of elk and moose go well together, I guess. And then you can just cut these off. Okay, and that's almost 90% of the fly. So now all you want is dubbing. And I have the dubbing somewhere here. As you can see, nicely labeled. I'm sure there are other breeds of dog that would work. Seal fur in the right color would work well. The idea here is to tie a light colored tractor pattern. That's really what this is. So, you know, the fact that I'm using a specific kind of dubbing from a specific breed of dog is just, you know, it's just the fun of it. Really, I got this. I got a big bag of this dubbing a couple of weeks ago at the end of season barbecue where we met in person. I guess a lot of people for the first time in a very long time. So with this dubbing and with a lot of natural dubbing material, some synthetics too, again, you just want the tiniest amount of dubbing at a time, because otherwise you just get a clump that's impossible to twist on the thread. So dub small amounts as tightly as you can. And that's probably where I go wrong with this, looking at the original samples that were given to me. The idea seems to be, don't do too much of that. So I try to refrain myself from, you know, slender, very slender, tightly dubbed bodies. So build a little bit of a taper and build a little bit of a thickness to this. You want it a little chunky. This is supposed to be a very, very good floater. And speaking of carp, in fact, I remember when I was out on Elk Lake about 3 years ago to the day, was about this time of year, and there was a lot of white fluff. I guess there must be some poplars around there or something. And the carp were definitely going after the seeds floating on the water. I think some kind of a light colored fly is going to, oh, this is, I found an ugly. This is a moose hair with a broken tip. Okay, better. This is a moose that did not use the correct brand of conditioner, I suppose. Okay, so when you come to move from the abdomen to the thorax, just lift the wing up and sneak in some of your dub thread right at the base of the wing. What that's gonna do, it's gonna lift up the wing a little bit. You still want that sort of angled forward look to it, but there is a set in the angle of the wings from tying them tips forward So you don't really have to worry about that unless you really overdub the thorax. Just put a little bit more dubbing. You can always add more. It's kind of like salt in a dish. A little bit at a time. So if I feel the need for more, I can always add more. Maybe just a touch more. So once you think you've achieved the taper you're looking for, just do a little bit of a head here. This takes a few more turns of thread, like probably on a size 12 hook. I could do also with 6/0 thread, it would work. With 8/0 thread, you just need a few more turns. And then whip finish a couple of times. This way you avoid using head cement and spilling it on your tying table. Not a pleasant experience. I just did it, I guess. That's you know, of course, as I was cleaning up the mess, I was thinking of Don Anderson's words of wisdom of using a pool noodle to stick the bottle of head cement into to give it a bit more stability. I was thinking of going one step further and also gluing a plate at the bottom of it all. So here I have a few fibers of sparkle that sit at the back of the wing. Here's the wing, and you know, if there's any fuzz, I mean, this is, you know, going to get much more ragged in use, but that's basically the fly. And I've tied some in size 14 as well to see what they look like. My originals were, the sample flies I got were all size 12, but the 14s look also pretty good. So you can sort of, for some reason, I guess today's a cloudy day and I'm having difficulty adjusting the light to the correct to the correct level. But that's the hair of the dog or dog hair, or vice versa, whichever